friends. Welcome to episode 234 of Storyteller Conclave. This is a show all about helping you run the best tabletop role-playing game that you can, whether you're a new storyteller or dungeon master learning the craft, or an experienced storyteller looking to take your game to the next level. I'm Sarah.
I'm Rob.
How we doing, Rob?
I am stirring tea.
Yes, you are.
Because honey is on the docket for today.
Long-time listeners of the show know that we never, ever, ever do a show without cups of tea in front of us.
That's right. We don't talk much about the tea, but we do have the tea, so...
It was a hot topic there for a second.
It was.
Pun intended.
It was. So... And honestly, if you're a long-time listener and you have other tea suggestions, please come onto our Discord and give us some ideas.
Yeah, sure.
We'd love to hear it. Because currently, right now, our running tea for the last year has been Harney & Sons Paris, and it has been amazing.
It's my favorite tea in the world.
It is a pretty grand tea.
Admittedly, I am not a connoisseur of the hot leaf water, so...
That's true. That is true. I've given you a couple different things, and you've liked pretty much everything I divvy up. So.
Yeah, sure, but the Paris is definitely my favorite.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Gaming. We have a big double feature weekend coming up.
Science fiction double feature.
Not all of it.
I mean, the first part is science fiction.
The first part of it's science fiction.
The second part, we're technically mice running around, so you could say Secret of the Nim.
So we got Sean's Nova Praxis game on Saturday, and then Mouse Guard on Sunday.
Yeah.
Luckily, the Mad Elf is feeling a little bit better from his little bout with COVID. He actually ended up missing my game the other weekend.
Sadly.
Sad to hear, but obviously, dude, get your rest. And I'm glad to hear that you are on the mend.
Yes. I'm looking forward to both games. We are in the Nova Praxis game. We are I think we're hitting the stride point. We're doing a little bit of respecking, I think, a few of the characters.
Yeah.
So we're at that, it's a campaign.
It's a campaign. Is this episode 3 or is this episode 4?
I think this is episode 4.
Is this episode 4? Oh,
yes.
Wow. It's official.
It's official.
It's official.
So,
all right.
Got to keep rolling now. And Mouse Guard, we're well into it.
Oh,
so.
yeah.
I think,
we're
I think this is going to be our beer and popcorn chill game. For this one, I know he wants to get back to it, but at the same time, I think it's gonna be a little bit of a relaxed game.
Well, yeah, he edited the Google invite to chop the time down on it.
Yeah,
because he just knows he doesn't have the energy for it post COVID. So it's
no harm there.
Absolutely understood. And Mouse Guard's always relaxing.
It's a good time.
Super nice time.
It's a good time. So,
all right, that's that.
That is the new news.
That's the new news.
I think that's it.
I think that's about it, yeah.
Yeah, so we got a bunch of new people in the Discord. We are so glad to have you all. We've been seeing a ton of new discussions popping up. So if you're out there and you've been questioning whether or not to join, please join.
We'd love to have new blood in the Discord and just join the discussion. Just to tell us what you're doing. Ask us some questions. Ask the other great people if there's some questions.
Yeah, and if you, it's one of the best things is people are talking about previous shows. Mm-hmm. So we're getting a lot of nice discussions about people listening to old shows and asking questions from those shows, which prompts us to some ideas for the future, which is great.
Yeah.
And I love seeing people talking about the current topic, like today's topic, and kind of priming the pump a little bit, which is wonderful to hear. So,
hey, actually, real quick before we get started, actually, there was something I kind of wanted to talk about a little bit. It was a discussion I saw on Reddit.
Okay.
Somebody was asking, what is your preferred term for the person who runs the game?
Oh, yeah, okay.
And I saw so many people up there going I hate the term storyteller.
Good. They can hate it all they want.
Right, I'm like...
They can hate it all they want.
Die mad about it, but
Yeah, that's a strange hill to die on.
But I guess a lot of people out there read into it that, if you call yourself a storyteller, that means that, you're telling the story and everybody else just has to shut up and listen to you. And I'm like... I think you're reading an awful lot into the term,
Let's start from the basics. I'm the dungeon master.
Right.
Okay.
How is that any less domineering
I'm the
than
game
storyteller?
master.
Yeah.
Okay. Neither of those are really great. You are not the master because now you're taking agency away from the players.
Right.
So realistically, it's about talking about what your forte is. If you're the combat master, okay, go right ahead. That's your game.
And do none of you guys show up with plot? Do none of you guys write anything for your game? Do you not voice NPCs? Do you not direct the PCs in a certain direction?
I'm also just gonna say, how many of the PCs show up with plot?
Yeah, next to none.
Yeah, or ideas. They're waiting to be spoon-fed something so that they can enjoy it and talk about it.
Exactly. So yes, I'm telling you guys a story.
Yes.
You get to participate in that story, and that's wonderful. But yes, I don't feel bad about being a storyteller.
No. So.
All right. Got that off my chest.
I'm glad.
Let's dive into the discussion.
Yeah. So today's topic,
combat,
is we're back to kind of talking about narrative and combat, but we're now taking it from the other direction.
Right. We did. Do you actually need combat, and how many ways can you circumvent actually getting into combat? And now we're like, yeah, no, let's kill people.
No, people want to go and be murder hobos, or just want to have conflict.
Yeah, sure.
Which is fine. That's the thing. Like, why not?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's the bread and butter of where these games came from.
But I think germane to the discussion about people on our Discord, we have a relatively new Discord member named GM Ben, who actually posted, I think, probably the thesis statement for this.
I agree. I completely agree.
On our Discord, and he says, I really do dislike how a lot of systems and people seem to treat combat as a separate mini game rather than the rest of the game world. As soon as initiative, or the system equivalent, everyone switches into a no RP zone. And so, like, why? Why is that,
Why is it important? Why can't you just, why do you want to kill the guards? Why do you feel the king needs to die? Why are you fighting orphans again? And my first question is, again? Again? Like, we need to talk, GM Ben, about why it's again.
Right.
Like, at some point, that needs to be a discussion, but not today.
Those are all questions of why this combat fits in the narrative, but for some reason we stop RPing when this happens.
Yeah,
or at least we give RP only lip service.
Or literally, it feels like it's a different game being inserted. Like the mechanics of something else just got slapped in.
Yeah.
To me, it is the break between I'm talking about MechWarrior and my character and sitting down and playing BattleTech.
Yep.
Like it's a completely separate game. You're not like, yeah, you're flavoring up how things are going, but it's 100% feeling different. Now, granted, personally, and I know Overwatch would feel the same way about going to Gen Con, we narrated the hell out of our BattleTech game.
Sure.
And it was fun. Nobody else at the other table seemed to have been doing that. But it's fun. And I think that's kind of where we're coming from with this is that narration and combat can go together.
Oh, sure,
That
absolutely.
is definitely something that happens. And often at our tables, it does.
Oh, yeah.
So for us, it's the typical of, like, we're talking about the thing that doesn't happen for us, but definitely occurs everywhere else.
But you keeping in mind, though, that, once again, you and I sit kind of in a position of privilege with our gaming group because it's a very curated gaming group of old friends that
who've gamed for years.
And
like,
stuff
well,
that. So
decades.
We all kind of know that but there's a lot of people who don't have these sort of curated gaming groups, or they're just getting started and they haven't, they don't have 30 years of experience gaming like you and I do.
Or even like 5 years or 2 years with the same group.
Sure.
So you end up with non-narrated actions even. Like you see 4 goblins in the room and one rushes up to you and literally someone sitting there at the table just goes, "I attack, 17 to hit." And you're like,
You attack with what?
Yeah,
what are we doing here?
Right. Like, there's no narration at all from the player's side. Now, is that a fault of them? Because they're thinking about it visually in their own mind, but what it is it's literally just something that pours out of them in an instant reaction.
It's enthusiasm is what it is.
Correct. I 100% agree.
In their mind's eye, a lot of times they are already envisioning of like, oh, I lash out and I hit this, but it happens that quick in their imagination, so they just want to get to the part where they do the damage, and they forget that, like, maybe you should describe, like, okay, well, I lash out with my longsword and try to, like, clothesline him as he runs past me, just take his head off or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think I want to just break from the conversation real quick and just say that this isn't a problem.
No, not in the least.
This isn't like a, like, oh, your table's bad and your players are bad if you're not narrating things. This is a constructive conversation about how to add a little extra flavor.
Or if you're just uncomfortable with that, what you can do to adjust you and your players. Because not all your players are going to narrate the situation, resolve actions, and narrate the results, right? That isn't going to happen every single time, right? You're not going to have the person be like, all right, I'm going to clothesline him and I'm going to use this action to do it. So, all right, we'll make a roll. You make okay, it was successful. Oh yeah, you easily clip him off of his feet and he's laying prone on his back, right? And then you look at your initiative list and you're like, all right, Susan, you're next. Like, you could change that, and there are some ideas for doing that instead of just asking, okay, who's next in the initiative order, knowing who's there, and narrating to that person, like, oh, okay, he's fallen onto his back. Susan, he's lying prone on his back with his shield off to the side. You've got an opportunity here.
Yeah.
And, like, that changes it from the mechanics of who is next in initiative and waiting for the call and waiting for the action. You're keeping them in the moment of the narration and drawing it in. And, and here I am using player names and not character names, but that's another aspect of it that we talked about. But the idea and of that style is was actually discussed on The Angry GM, if you follow that, as combat dolphin. You do combat like a dolphin, and that is you come into narration and then back into mechanics and back into narration.
Like a dolphin
moving through the water.
Jumping up across the water.
So you take that breath because you need that air to get through the tough stuff, to get back into it. So that way you're always taking a little bit of narration as you move through the mechanical bites.
And I think to kind of piggyback off that too, I would say I've seen it a lot at my table where if you as the storyteller can take the lead on the narration, even if your players aren't narrating, ask them to narrate. They probably have a cool idea. Like a lot of times when I say, "What does that look like when you land that hit?" Or is more common parlance in the I guess in the D&D community is, how do you want to do this? You don't have to wait for a killing blow to ask them how they want to do it. If they do something something good, just land a solid hit. Ask them. Ask them what it looked like. Yep. They're going to give you some cool ideas because they see their characters a lot clearer in their mind's eye than you do. And they're going to love the opportunity to tell you how awesome their character is.
Yeah.
But secondly, though, if you engage them on a narrative sense. For those of you storytellers who like to allow for rule of cool in your combat, you're going to find a lot more opportunities to open up things like that. When you say like, okay, well, you kind of clothesline him and he falls prone, you're going to see someone follow up with, oh, he's prone? Hold on, let me, as he clotheslines him like this, I'm going to sweep in and I'm going to do this other thing.
Because he's on his back,
and you're gonna want people doing like combo attacks, like it's Chrono Trigger, and that's what opens the door for a lot of that stuff. And if you're willing to allow for a little rule of cool, you're gonna see some neat stuff happen.
Well, and likewise, there's nothing to say that during a failure, your players may start getting into those as well. Like, oh, I miss this attack, so I end up swinging wildly, and my sword hits a tree. Okay. So the goblin sees this and catches your shoulder right after it hits, and knocks you free of your weapon, which is still stuck in the tree.
Yep.
Okay. They led you into that moment.
Yeah, sure.
The other thing about the narration and doing this is it gives you the flexibility to adjust the ratio of combat. You can do one thing in this that adds an extra piece of flavor, and that is telegraphing. So, and that scales combat right there. People always talk about like, oh, well, you can't telegraph because that makes things too easy. So don't then all the time. But if you feel you need to because it's changing the way the combat's going, things aren't as fun, telegraph it. Why not? Let them see what's coming at them. They're physically there.
Sure.
They're not idiots. Some of them are trained fighters, in some cases. So by doing that, that gives them a little more to visualize and a little more to work out what they're doing next.
Yeah. And also keep in mind, your job is not to kill your players. Your job is to facilitate a fun time for your players.
God, I hope you're not killing your players.
Oh, yeah. It's characters. Right.
Let's stick with those characters.
You probably also should not kill your players.
Yes.
That's
when we say clear your darlings, your players are not your darlings.
So pro advice, guys.
All right.
So here's my thesis statement. Combat is a scene.
What do you mean by that, sir?
Well, let me tell you. So yeah, combat, I really think like combat needs to be treated like any other scene. I know there's an impulse to kind of separate it of like, oh, we put combat between scenes to kind of change the pace up. But combat is a scene, right? Combat is a thing that should advance your story.
Just like any other challenge, it should feel meaningful.
Exactly. So it's not entirely exhaustive list, but a decent one, I think, of things that you should think of when making a combat encounter, when inserting one into your story. And again, this isn't a checklist. You shouldn't write this down, and just things to bear in mind, right?
Write it down.
Well, okay. What I'm saying is this isn't like I didn't do A, B, C, D, and E, therefore my combat encounter is bad.
It sucks.
But it's just, don't be a negative Nancy.
All I can think of is was it you suck at Photoshop? It's like, you suck at combat encounters.
You suck at cooking, yes, you totally suck.
So, but I'm with you, and I think this list is good. I think this list is good.
Checklist of things to keep in mind. And again, it's not exhaustive. If you don't do all of these things, it doesn't mean your combat encounter is bad. It's just a good practices. All right. First off, it should tell a story.
I agree.
All right. So what was learned from your combat?
Mm-hmm.
We don't often think about that.
No.
What are we learning from combat? Well, we're learning to get our butts kicked. Well, okay, maybe. But, and again, it doesn't necessarily need to be a huge revelation. Like, Sean and I were talking on our way over here about, like, we're big Rurouni Kenshin fans, And, oftentimes, like, in a lot of animes, like, you watch, like, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, what did you learn in combat? Oh, he used the ancient secret, Saotome technique, and, that means he's got the same master that my grandfather did. He's actually part of our clan.
Right.
The whole time. It doesn't need to be that. That's not the level of learning I'm talking. But things you might learn during a combat encounter is like, oh, the enemy is willing to use lethal force.
Mm-hmm.
They tried to kill us.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of a big deal, depending on how the lethality in your game is played out,
Yeah.
The enemy really, really wants this target dead. Are you protecting somebody? Did they send master assassins after him?
Yeah.
You learned something, what they're willing to do to try to kill him.
Mm-hmm.
The villain has gotten personally involved.
You've been noticed.
Exactly.
I always love that concept, is that villains shouldn't notice the players, or the characters, until it's meaningful.
Yes, exactly.
So.
Or even just something like, hey, the bad guys have necromancers in their ranks. We fought a bunch of skeletons. We didn't know they had that ability.
Yep.
You know?
And part of this is not just on the players discovering this from your cryptic combat at the end. Some of this is you as a storyteller telegraphing it to them.
Yeah, sure. I mean, literally just the presence. Like I said, like, assassins show up to kill the guy you're protecting. Okay, that tells you something about the people who are trying to kill him.
Likewise,
they have access to multiple trained assassins.
Yeah, but at the same time, how fervent are they? Like Sean's Nova Praxis game, we actually had like rumpties and basically cultists in the same group.
Yeah, and that was a valuable lesson we learned there.
Yeah, that some of the guys were like, hey, I'm not here. I'm here for a paycheck. I'm not here to die for the cause. I don't even know what the cause is.
And we thought, oh, these are just some guys, until somebody pulled out like a what is that thing called, a murder ball?
It's called a murder ball. Basically, it's a ridiculous fragmentation explosive grenade.
Yeah, it's a big grenade, and tried to nuke not only us but him with him.
Did not work out. Did not work out for them.
And, so we were like, oh, okay, fanatics willing to kill themselves and basically suicide attacks to try to take us out. These two people are not the same. We have different factions working here, So,
and another example for storytelling is, and specifically in my last D&D game, I did that adventure where you guys had to end up helping that death cult group.
Yeah.
And I had to tell a story with each one of the combats of what you were finding through that whole discovery process. So each one of the combats you were each involved with gave you another piece of the puzzle of all the parties that were involved. Who are these cultists? Because you didn't even know they existed until you found out who sacked a caravan originally, and then what's this other group that's here, and why are they even around? Oh, It's because the world's messed up. So now we've got a third party who's just trying to mess with the whole thing.
Yeah.
So each one of those was a step of discovering a section of the story that eventually led to okay, we're going to have to protect these people to get what we need done.
Right, right.
So,
all right. So the second part of this is, and it's kind of goes along with what you were just talking about, is that the encounter the battle should make narrative sense. Okay. We all love our random encounter charts.
Sure.
But I think those belong a little more in OSR games than they do in more narrative games. It's not really the focus of what we focus on here at Storyteller Conclave. So, we want your narrative, your fights to make sense narratively. Okay, so things to consider when trying to wrap a combat encounter into your narrative. What provoked the attack? Do the PCs know?
Yeah.
I mean, are they just being attacked at random? Is part of the attack telling the PCs why they're being attacked?
Yeah.
Like a mob boss sending his goons to send a message.
Love those.
This is because you crossed Don Corleone.
Oh, so no, Don Corleone is here. He knows that we're here.
And he's upset with us enough to send his goons.
Yep.
Yes. Yep. Okay. What is the goal of the attackers?
Yeah, or the attack in general.
I mean, so often it's just reduce the other party's hit points to 0, right?
But that's not always a perfect goal.
It's not always a perfect goal. It's not always a narratively appropriate thing. Like, you don't always have to fight to the death in your games, you know? You could kill, sure, but you can also capture. You can injure. You can intimidate.
Yeah. I mean, some of the most well-known examples of situations is that you do something because you want to be in control over another person, and you do that by instilling fear or literally weakening them to be able to have that control. And by killing someone, you create a martyr, which is far more dangerous, by far.
Sure.
Because now somebody has nothing else to live for, and you've caused a problem.
Or at very least, you've got a body to clean up.
Which is far worse in most cases.
Killing is a far higher profile crime than maiming somebody, or just injuring them. Like, it's assault, right?
Yep.
You beat somebody off, they go away with beat somebody up, they go away with a bloody nose,
right?
And they're and maybe they don't even go to the cops about it because it's just a disagreement between gentlemen or whatever.
And intimidating.
You kill somebody though.
Yeah.
Okay, you've just raised the stakes.
What I was going to say with intimidation is it's actually worse in most cases because you're changing their ability to even see themselves. Like, when you intimidate somebody, what are they going to do? Go to someone else and say this guy's really intimidating. Okay, who are you to ask that of me?
Right, but intimidation, when you run a short combat encounter just long enough to drop them from 50 hit points to 10 in one hit.
Yep.
And then you just use your next round to go and stay down.
Yeah.
And then just walk off. That's intimidation.
Yeah.
You can absolutely do that. You don't have to have your dudes come in and kill the PCs, nor fight to the death themselves. Sometimes they come in, drop somebody to prove a point, and then they walk off. And
not everyone is the Karate Kid.
Remember, we can do this at any given time.
Right. Exactly.
Is it an assassination? That's another type of attack here. Not the target isn't always the PCs. Maybe it is one of the PCs. Yeah. Maybe it's an NPC that they're hanging around with or protecting outright. And maybe they just need to defend somebody.
Yeah. Or even a thievery in that sense too that becomes the same way.
Yep. Or another one is it a guerrilla strike? Because So guerrilla tactics are often hit and run to try to diminish resources. Your goal isn't to win a battle. Your goal is just to make the enemy expend ammunition, maybe sabotage their supply runs, things like that, and then you fade. Like, you're not putting your lives on the line, you're not necessarily trying to create casualties or anything like that, but you're trying to diminish the enemy's resources and stuff.
Yeah, resources are also strength, so like some of the early guerrilla tactics weren't even to cause a lot of damage. It was just to keep people awake. It was to demoralize the people around them, the support staff, so that they didn't feel safe and they didn't feel secure with the people that were defending them.
Yeah,
like all of that is war tactics 101.
Yeah, I can imagine, like, trying to get a D&D group through like thick woods where like the wood elves are, you know, and they're like, they don't like trespassers in their sacred woods. So hitting the PCs with little hit and run tactics. Not really to try to kill them, but, you burned 4 5th level spells trying to fight back against them, so that's something you don't have anymore. They're like, oh, we gotta take a long rest. Here? Where there's a bunch of Wood Elf ambushers? No, I don't think so. In this economy? I don't think so, Susan. Alright, are the attackers willing to die for the cause?
Most shouldn't be.
Most shouldn't be.
Nobody wants to. I mean, you're no longer helping the cause by death. That's my favorite thing is that a good commander will always look at his troops and say, you don't help me dead. So you do 0 damage when you're dead.
I believe it was General Patton who said, no man ever won a war by dying for their country. He won war by making the other sorry bastard die for his.
Yep. And it's the truth of most groups, period.
Mm-hmm.
They're willing to defend, they're willing to take care of the problem, but they are not willing to sacrifice themselves.
Exactly. And most people won't want their henchmen to sacrifice themselves. Henchmen aren't limitless.
No.
People are finite.
I can't remember what the Monarch said in Venture Brothers, but he was just like, do you think it's easy to hire these people? It's like a 45-day period. I've got to go through background checks.
Yeah.
Like, and he goes through this whole thing about it, and it was awesome.
Let's see here. So think about, like, at what point are your attackers going to retreat?
Yeah.
Have they thought of an escape route so they don't just get captured or subdued, If this is genuinely a thought out planned attack on your attacker's part, right? They may well have like a getaway car. Or at least
tunnels, smoke bombs, something to help them.
Doors that have been propped open, so that they can get out and possibly close them behind you so that you can't follow. Right?
Yep.
Things to consider.
Extra resources in case things go sideways.
Actually, Knox has a question here in the live chat. He says, is there a subtle way to signal to your players that you're not going to let them rest anytime soon? What's the save point right before the big door? Do we even telegraph this?
Oh, that's a longer...
It's a really good question.
I would say it really depends. I mean, if you are gearing up for something like that, telegraphing the scope of the endeavor that they're about to go on and the challenges they're in, I think is you telegraphing it. Having an NPC saying, all right, we figured out what we're all going to do. Let's go over the plan one more time. We're going in, we're going to go in the morning. We're going to make it through here. You're going to do this. You're going to do this. And then we're finally going to get to the last chamber and we're doing this. So it sounds like it's all in one action, that there's no time to pause in this. So I think those are the kinds of telegraphs that you want to put in as a storyteller to let them know, hey, clearly this is one long endeavor.
Yeah.
So
the way I would do it, especially if we're talking about Dungeons and Dragons, like a really typical Dungeons and Dragons trope is going on watch at night, right? Who's going to take first watch? Who's going to take second watch? Why do we do this? Because inherently we expect the storyteller to attack us when we bed down for the night, right?
Yeah.
Attack them.
Yeah.
Make that watch for something. If they go to bed in a place that they cannot rest, who's on watch? Cool. Roll initiative.
Yeah, and honestly, my whole thing is doing the difference of when they're out on the road or something, you let them know it's safe. This is a safe area. There are guards. You've done this multiple times who travel the road. You feel very safe. You probably only ever have one person on watch, and they're being very casual about it.
Yeah, I don't.
It's just to keep the fire gone. Versus, this is a dangerous area. You're very aware of that. You may want to have 2 people on watch.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you know this. I mean, you're trained.
I don't think there's any problem with telling the player. You don't even need to telegraph it or hint at it or dance around. Just outright tell them, yeah, you guys are safe here. Why? Because, man, I don't know about you, but, I don't have that time to waste to catering to your guys' paranoia just so that you never know when danger's going to happen. No, sometimes you're pretty clear that danger isn't going to happen here. I go shopping at the grocery store, I'm pretty certain I'm not going to get jumped in aisle 3, while searching for Cool Whip.
Unless you're playing Call of Cthulhu, which could very much change that.
Which could very much
your
change
paranoia
sure.
pays off.
but for the most part though, like
Yeah.
I don't need to put someone on watch while I'm shopping for my groceries.
No,
you know,
definitely not.
because it's a safe area, it's a safe activity, and so if they're just camping for the evening, just tell them you guys are good.
Yeah.
Don't bother with the whole watch thing. Let's just get your long rest. Push your long rest button. You know.
Also, don't even need to do it. It's the next morning. You all are well rested.
Boom! It's the next morning. Good. Congratulations. Yeah.
Yeah. Just skip past it. Move on to the next thing. It's taking you 2 days to travel there. You had a nice rest in between.
Yeah.
You know, whatever. Move to the action.
All right. So back to the list here. Did the attackers do anything to prepare the battlefield beforehand?
Oh yeah.
So often we just kind of throw our enemies in on like a flat board, with a little grid.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we just smash some minis together and we roll our attacks and stuff like that. But if your enemies think about it and they're laying an ambush, or at least that they prepare for for this ahead of time, they may have set traps. Maybe if they're like good guys. If they're at least respectful of people around them, they may have cleared the area of civilians.
Mm-hmm.
Like we don't want any errant casualties. And imagine the tension of like the enemies walking in and like all the civilians kind of like doing that thing
Western.
like they do in the Western where like they close
the doors shut. Kids are swept off the street.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And so it's like all of a sudden, like within 30 seconds, you're the only people on the street.
Yeah, and all the windows are closed and all the doors are locked, and there's a few people peeping out little shutters and things like that. Yeah.
Did they position snipers in high positions?
Yeah.
I mean, because that's just good tactics.
Mm-hmm.
You going back to the Western, you always see the person with the long rifle up on top of the saloon.
Yeah. One of the things that I was reading about this in specific was having spotters.
Oh yeah,
just calling out. Like, have somebody on the battlefield. Like, if you've got a bunch of goblins all shooting arrows from the back line, right, and you've got a couple in the front that are running in. There's nothing to say that you couldn't have another goblin off to the side who literally through the entire combat is just moving around and shouting things back.
Sure,
that makes sense. Like, that means they're prepared. They're communicating and doing and combating you in a smart manner.
Yeah, man. Use some if your enemies are intelligent enough to do it, use tactics.
Use tactics.
You don't always have to just run up and die. With your enemies.
Fall back, heal.
Are the exits covered in case the PCs try to escape?
Oh yeah, there's one.
Yeah.
Or do they have an escape route that they want you to go down? Are they funneling you?
Are you being flushed out? Yeah. Are you being funneled?
Yep.
Yeah. That's another good one. Into an ambush point.
Yeah, or just a holding area.
Mm-hmm.
All
right. So those are some like tactical concerns, but kind of still along that narrative line of like making things sense in your narrative. Do the attackers actually fit within the verisimilitude of your story?
Mm-hmm.
First off, are they ecologically sound?
Mm-hmm.
By this, I mean, if you're opening a tomb that hasn't been opened for 1,000 years, why is there a tribe of goblins inside that are alive and well?
Is there a hole in back? Are there tunnels to somewhere else inside that they could have come into the area?
I mean, maybe, but more likely, if it's been sealed for 1,000 years... You should maybe stock it with some undead, maybe some constructs,
an ooze,
ghosts, things that would have been able to survive 1,000 years in a sealed environment, or not in the case of undead.
Mm-hmm.
And does it make sense that the attackers are here now doing what they're doing?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Did they know about the PC's plans enough to target their attack? Could they possibly be prepared for the PCs?
Mm-hmm.
Think about what your attackers might know and what they might have accounted for in their attack. If this is kind of again to address the issue of like random encounter charts.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times, okay, we'll put humanoid characters on our random encounter charts and stuff like that, but like, if they don't know that the PCs are going to be on that road, like, how are they setting up an ambush?
Right. they should feel just as surprised.
So just make sure that the attack actually should happen within your story.
Okay, and that wraps up making the narrative make sense.
Yes.
All right. There should be a goal. And this G goal is between both you and the players.
Yes.
In this sense. They should know why they're going into this combat.
Mm-hmm. What are we doing here?
Yeah.
What are the stakes at hand for fighting?
Sometimes this is referred to as the mission stat block.
Yes.
So that you can, sometimes you'll check boxes as they complete things. Sometimes it's just completing tasks in it. You see it in PC RPGs all the time where there's a quest log that you have to complete certain things. The combats are the same type of way. You know, will the PCs gain something by winning this fight? Is that what they're trying? They're trying to get to something on the other side to retrieve it, or they're trying, maybe they're chasing someone down, whatever that thing's. What do they stand to lose if they lose the fight?
Yeah.
Are there partial conditions where maybe you defeat the enemy, but whatever the MacGuffin is either gets away, or is broken or damaged in the process,
or you lose it, or a protected NPC was killed.
Yep. Collateral damage is always
cool. We killed all the assassins, but they hit the target.
Yeah. Like one of the good examples is like you're going to fight a bunch of undead, but one of those undead is someone you know. Okay, so it's like, ooh, do we want to wipe all these guys out? But we really need that guy. We want to try and save him. Mm-hmm. Okay, how do we want to do that? So now you got
him with a potion of weakness and then feed him a golden apple, I believe.
If it's Minecraft.
Yes.
Yeah. But in the same regard, like now you have to make that decision during combat of how you're going to handle that, and that's narrative. That's story right there. Mm-hmm. If they end up doing more, or maybe they just subdue everybody, so now there's more to be gained from it, possibly.
Yep.
So it doesn't have to be explicitly spelled out, but you as the storyteller should understand what the goal is, and the player should be able to retrieve that through going into it.
Right. And I think when you're kind of jotting down your notes for planning your sessions and stuff like that, like this is a really great place to kind of put a branching if-then statement in your notes, of like, okay, if they defeat the enemies, this is the outcome. But if they defeat the enemies and lose the MacGuffin, this is the outcome. You know, you've kind of got some really distinct outcomes there is when you identify what stakes there are going into the battle.
Yeah, and some of those stakes don't have to be directly involved with the combatants. Mm-hmm. They can be the space that they're fighting in, even. Like good examples are like, you're on a sinking ship. You're below decks. You're all trying to get out with the thing. So the stake is survive. That's stake number one, right? Everyone is just trying to survive.
Yeah, sure.
Are you trying to rescue some of these people who are fighting you on this ship while trying to keep the MacGuffin? Like, all of those come into play. But the real truth is, water is rising. Mm-hmm. Every round, you take a level off of the game board.
Yeah.
And that level is now underwater. Right? And anybody who's in it has to make athletics checks or whatever necessary to survive. Mm-hmm. And once they're under 2 levels of water, they're at like a -4 to their athletics checks. Right? Because they're trying to find pockets of air until they can get out of it. Mm-hmm. So every time things are getting more and more challenging. That's kind of a good hard move that you can do as a storyteller to watch the tension and build that kind of pieces and have that stake be very obvious.
Yeah. And I think I'm glad you mentioned hard moves too, because there's definitely some things to be said about using those during a combat scene. Mm-hmm. One of my favorite things is first off, I'm a big proponent of hard moves. I know a lot of people out there think that takes away player agency, but I dare say not everything has to be within the player's purview to be able to intercede,
Oh, yeah.
Like, there definitely is stuff, like, nobody on the Titanic was like, we took away my agency when we hit that iceberg, No, because sometimes crap just happens, A good hard move in the middle of a combat encounter can do cool things to change the situation. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm imagining a combat encounter where, like, you're in a shootout in the lobby of an office building, right?
Mm-hmm.
With some opposing force.
Sure.
And something like a helicopter crashes into the building, changes the battlefield, adds an environmental aspect to it of, like, shrapnel and fire.
Maybe even the carcass of the helicopter hanging in a space precariously.
Maybe things are now falling down. Like, if I'm running this in Savage Worlds, anybody who draws a club is I've got a chart of, like, mishaps.
Debris, yeah.
Yeah, like maybe a piece of debris falls on you if it's like a low club, or like if it's a high club, then that means like you take some fire damage or something like that. A lot of different game systems have ways of incorporating, like, I guess these would be like layer actions
or consequences
for Dungeons and Dragons in there, or consequences, complications,
like complications in 7th Sea.
Yeah,
same kind of a thing where like if you have one of these, you kind of have to make enough successes to overcome the complications as well.
And maybe it changes the combat from, like, we need to shoot the dudes who were here in the lobby to, like, we should evacuate the building. It's now on fire and slowly collapsing.
Right. Drag who you can out.
Right. And let's escape, because screw the firefight. We're gonna get, this building's collapsing.
Yeah.
We need to get out of here, you know? And it's a good thing to signal not only that the world is dynamic enough that big events like this can happen to change your battlefield, but also it's more fun for the players when things change. They now have to think on their feet about how they're going to react to these new circumstances.
There's I think it's in The King's Men, which was the precursor to Kingsman.
Okay.
Where they're coming across, like 5 of them are coming across a World War I battlefield, slowly creeping with their rifles. And at a certain point, they all stop and stare because they see that there's 5 shadows in front of them now. They're in dead man's land, basically, in between the trenches in the dead of night.
No man's land. Yeah.
Where artillery has been shelling. And so the other group literally looks at them and just puts their finger to the lip, and everybody puts their rifles down because they realize if they open fire, both trenches are going to lay them out. So they put their rifles down, everybody pulls out melee weapons, and they have the most quiet fight they can possibly have.
Oh, wow.
And it was seeing that scene made me think about the hard move of you can't use firearms because you know you're going to get mowed down by machine guns of your own side.
Yep.
Like
they don't know at that range.
They have no idea, and nobody should be out there.
Gunfire in no man's land, kill it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Exactly.
That's why they call it no man's land.
Right.
Because
exactly.
no man should be out there.
Exactly. So things like that can definitely change the dynamics of the game. In comedy of that, in Storks, the movie, which is way better than it has the right to be.
Right.
There's a scene where literally the penguins are on the roof getting ready to leave in a helicopter, and
like you do.
And there's a baby involved, and they don't want to wake the baby. Nobody wants to wake the baby. And so they have this terribly quiet fight where, like, people are getting stabbed, and they're, like, shoving pillows in mouths and trying to keep people silent so the baby doesn't wake up. And it's those kinds of moments that set a hard conditional barrier, that makes the tension change. And I think that's also kind of leads into my next thing, which is talks about the pacing of a fight.
Yeah.
Is that stories have timelines. They have points of tension, points of revelation, points of setback, highs and lows, so that you feel the beginning, the middle, and the end. Combats can do the same way. Is that you can have opening combats, and in speaking to Knox's kind of question in a way of not giving someone rest and moving through something, a combat doesn't just have to be one little encounter. It can be a series of events that escalate and then de-escalate.
Yeah.
Depending on how things progress. And so adding those tension points in of, like, okay, you're now in a room that's full of traps because you were chased out of the other room into it, and this room is full of traps. You can't recall where all of them are. Kind of a thing. It's like, okay, so we're dancing around a room doing combat.
Yeah. And like, you can do a scene transition like that in the middle of combat too. Like, I'm thinking like Dungeons and Dragons, and I think a lot of us think that once you're in tactical combat. Once you're in initiative,
Yep.
you have to stay in initiative. And I see so many discussions online about, like, well, how do chases even work? Because they have the exact same movement speed you do and blah, 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 you know? And it's like, well, no, you don't have to tell your story like that. Like, the rules of turn-based combat don't have to dictate the pace of your combat.
No.
If you want them to be able to flee into the next room and then take the battle there, you can just be like, you guys flee into the next room. Now here's the new map. Now everybody roll a fresh initiative. Now the fight's here.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah.
As more dudes come pouring in, more space ninjas or whatever, you know?
Right.
And then, okay, you beat all those guys, and you flee into the next hallway, and you turn the corner, and here's this big ballroom, and new map. Like, new initiative, cool,
right.
But it's still kind of the same combat encounter.
You're still moving through it. And I was thinking about this. Oh, speaking of pacing, one of the things that was discussed was the idea of having a moment of speech in your combat, where you have the, depending on the mechanics, sometimes free speech as an action is just something that happens.
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody takes the time to do that. But if you as a storyteller can set in the order where it belongs, whether it's, players interact, and then the NPCs go, and then everyone gets a speech action if they want it. Mm-hmm. Before the next encounter. That way you can have little quips and monologues and we need to do this and let's get them here. Let's get the heck out of here. Decisions can be made. A narrative can be discussed and interwoven between not just the PCs but also the NPCs.
That's
you can,
the big thing.
Without your players going, okay, I sneak attack him while he's monologuing. No, you're not. This is the talky phase.
Right. I'm not allowed to sneak attack you while you were monologuing. Therefore, no, he gets to say.
Right. And now we're back into the whatever the phase of combat that we're in.
Yes.
But pre-setting that as a thing in your game so that your players are comfortable with it and know when it's going to happen changes that dynamic and allows you to have that breath.
And also, like, explicitly saying that speech is is part of combat.
Yeah.
Explicitly puts it on the table that you want speech in combat. Mm-hmm. We're not just here to roll dice and reduce hit points. Like, this is a scene. Please talk. You should be shouting directions or making quips or, whatever, or questioning things, having dialogue back and forth with the villain as he's there.
I always go back to the fight scene with Inigo Montoya. And, is that his conversation is just as important as his blade in that scene.
Yeah.
Every single moment of that. And it's those kinds of scenes that, again, impact the story and have it move forward.
Exactly. I mean, think of his fencing match with Wesley. Mm-hmm. Would that scene have been as good or as impactful if they were silent through it? No, it wouldn't have meant anything. But the fact that they're all like, "Oh, I see you're using Capitello."
Capifeo.
Yeah, so I thought it fitting, given the rocky terrain.
Yes.
That's very good unless your opponent has studied his Agrippa, which I have.
I love all that.
Yeah, I mean, just great, absolutely great, and you can have that in your games too if you allow for it. So,
I don't think there's any problem with those ever.
All right. I think that more or less exhausts my list.
Let's wrap all of those lines, just so in case people are taking notes.
Yeah, that was a lot.
It was a lot, and we broke down a lot. So a combat scene, it should tell a story, make narrative sense, there should be a goal, check your pacing for the fight, and maybe add a speech round. Mm-hmm. And that's so that all those pieces are good ideas.
Yes.
To keep things narrative within your story.
Absolutely.
All right. Another new listener threw a question in our Discord. Thank you very much, Philly Fan.
Philly Fan. Okay.
That's just fun to say.
Yeah, it is. So Philly Fan asks, in Delta Green, there's a mechanical as well as narrative drawbacks to getting in a fight. I just started playing Delta Green after running my 5th edition campaign, where we were narrative but not mechanical consequences, with the same group of people, and I've felt that everyone treats combat with more weight and importance now that it has some quote-unquote teeth.
I like that.
Do you think combat needs to have both narrative and mechanical effect in order for the players to engage with it narratively instead of numerically? need is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that question.
I agree. I'll speak to it on a couple things. If the setting dictates it, like Delta Green, I'll come at it from a different angle. 7th Sea. Death is not something that happens. Like, you don't go into a combat in the 7th Sea world and expect to murder people. You're not doing that. You'll injure people. You'll knock them out. They might run away. Like, that's what heroes do, and even villains to a degree. Nobody murders.
That's why I played an anti-hero.
You did. And the point of it is that causes reputational damage when you do those types of things versus being the honorable person. So that sets the difference between a hero and a villain. And those types of games definitely set that as a currency with them, and that should be carried as a way to help those narratives. I think I'm not certain how Delta Green sees it, but some games even consider combat to be stressful, and therefore it adds stress every time you do combat.
Oh yeah, I think it was Alien RPG or something. It's like the moment combat kicks off, everybody gains 1 stress.
Well, I think it started with if you see an alien, you immediately gain stress.
Yeah.
If you know there's an alien near you because it's gone off on a meter, you have a chance to gain stress.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure Call of Cthulhu has a very similar mechanic where it's like, oh, you glimpsed a mythos creature. Time to lose sanity.
Yeah. So those types of costs can add weight to combat because it's setting appropriate. And it keeps your players in the setting. But having that mechanic cause narrative weight can sometimes feel like a bad currency. It can put too much of a mechanic on the narrative.
Yeah, I guess it entirely depends on the weight of the disincentive.
I agree. Like, did humanity mean anything in Vampire the Masquerade?
Usually not.
Exactly. It didn't have the same weight. So that's where I'm saying, like, mechanics don't always pay off, and sometimes it comes down to the table, because we didn't really even recognize humanity as a stat even in the games that I played, except for when it became necessary as a stat, because as players we knew diablerie was evil and would cause torment to your soul.
Right.
You know, and those who did it should be questioned and watched, because they could turn to basically demons at any time. And that whole concept was carried role-playing. We didn't need a mechanic behind it. We were doing more weight than the mechanic ever could. But not every table's that way. Not every story is that way.
Some tables are like diablerie is delicious, and that Assamite is a juice box.
I nearly spit my tea.
You're welcome. But yeah, no, I don't think it needs to lean back on the phrasing of your question. I don't think it needs to have both narrative and mechanical effect. I don't think anything needs to have an effect. Purely, like, I don't think you ever need a mechanical effect out of anything. I dare say narrative effects are probably more consequential. I think a lot of people always reach for the mechanical effect. They want it to have, like, oh, well, you know, it hurts you in some numerical way so that you can quantify the harm that it does to you. But, like, try reaching for things like, if you do this, you will be exiled as punishment. If you do this, you will never work in this town again. If you do this, then Don Corleone's men, will never, like, you'll escalate the conflict with him.
Yeah.
And you'll be a marked man.
I agree with those. I think those are all good examples, but, like, I'm also thinking to the fact of, like, the One Ring kind of travel mechanics where, like, okay, you're going to go in, if you decide to take this combat, you're going to expend a die worth of resources. So your D12 die of resources now becomes a D10 automatically. Like, not you as if you used it.
Yeah, sure.
So in that, you only have so much resources before you have to make it back, otherwise you're suffering or losing other things. So I think in some cases where you have where resources are necessary to cause a strain, or some kind of a mechanical effect helps with identifying for some players. Because we do have mechanical players.
No. In you're absolutely correct about that. I think my only point is that a lot of times as storytellers we fall into that trap of thinking that the only consequence that we have to met out is shoving our characters closer to death.
Yeah, changing the paper.
Right. Like, how do we make things... If you do this, it will make things more dangerous and you might die.
Yeah.
Well, okay, that's not... Like, I don't want to kill my characters.
Right.
You know, so shoving them closer to death and making things more lethal for them isn't necessarily the thing that I want to do. Personally, I want my characters to live with their mistakes.
Right.
Rather than be killed by them, because that's a lesson they don't get to carry.
Yeah.
That's nothing that doesn't progress the story, that ends it.
Yeah. But, like, again, my thought of that would be something like, we're a bunch of, we're out on the sea, we're chasing down the thing, we're taking out one of the other ships. You have a choice. You can attack their ship and try and get their stuff, but by doing so, you run the risk of losing resources, and you may have to turn to a port and lose the catch-up that you have. They're going to make it there before you.
Yeah.
Or they're going to get away.
Yeah.
And you have to live with that consequence that when you get to the next port that you're supposed to be catching them at, that they've already got a foothold. Their men are all over the island searching for the thing that you were looking for.
Yep.
So,
and it could have been easy. It could have been easy, but you had to...
You had to fight.
You had to fight.
Yep. You made the decision to fight.
So, yeah.
So that's where I'm at with that Philly fan. I hope that kind of helps from both directions, both talking about how mechanics can weigh at the right points, but at the same time, narrative weight has its own meaning.
Yeah.
When it's appropriate, and I think sometimes more of a weight.
Yeah, and I think if you've got the option, go for the narrative instead of the mechanical.
Yeah.
Just my humble opinion. But
there are players who are going to need it.
There are players who are going to need the mechanical disincentives or consequences, I suppose. Not disincentives, the consequences.
Well, I think it all depends on how they're playing the game.
Sure.
So,
sure.
I mean, we know people who definitely in our gaming youth were very mechanical because they came from classic OSR learning.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so mechanics are where their brain starts. And if you can show them the resource loss and then explain that through a narrative view, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Now there's a weight to them, and eventually that rule system can get peeled away till they just feel the narrative weight.
And there are some people who are not into the narrative of the story enough to care about narrative consequences.
Correct.
You'll have those people who are just kind of leaning murder hobo, and you're like, oh, if you do that, you'll be a pariah in the city. And they'll be like, okay.
Whatever.
Cool, I kill him anyways, and I take his stuff. I mean, I'll be a pariah, but I'll be 500 gold richer.
That's right. Yeah, and this guy will be dead.
Right,
yeah.
And this guy will be dead.
Right.
So, sometimes you do need the mechanics to back it up, but I would say try narrative first.
Yeah.
There's a lot of really creative stuff you can do with narrative.
Yeah, especially when it's part of the mechanics.
And I think there's an importance to being the first follower there.
Oh, very much so.
Of make sure that you kind of explain the narrative consequence to them, explain what the lay of the land is and whatnot, and make them think about it. And then you've kind of set that precedent that narrative consequence is a thing that you are intending on following up with, and then do it.
Yeah.
Show them the narrative consequences and have some teeth with it.
Yeah. And don't always go to the snappy kind of thing that we always think of as like, oh, you killed a guy, so now the guards are putting up signs because you're a murderer in town.
Yeah, sure.
And you're wanted for murder. You don't always have to lean that direction. You could also just have like the Assassin's Guild show up and be like, hey, we heard you did some good work.
Someone slips a note into his pocket with just a black handprint that says, we know.
Yeah. I mean, that's simple. Like, and then it's always like, hey, we saw that you did some work. Now, that's one. This is our job in town. Don't step on our toes. Have a contract next time.
Yeah.
You know, and then if they do it again, they're like, okay, that's two. You don't get a third strike.
I'm surprised you get a second.
Yeah. We're taking a cut. And you better go take your consequences with the magistrate.
This time we take a cut monetarily. Next time we take a cut physically.
And you don't want us to take that cut, because they're way more dangerous than the guard.
Yep.
So, yeah. All right.
We good?
Yeah, I feel pretty good about this.
Yeah,
I hope everybody else kind of got through it. We didn't want this show to get too long.
Look at us nailing it. Nailing it.
All right, next week's topic.
MacGuffins. It's a 202.
It's a 202, so we're talking about MacGuffins. Now, not everybody knows what a MacGuffin is. And in fact, I dare say there's some story writers who don't know what MacGuffins are, but
Fair enough. It is the object of importance that sits at the center of a story. Okay, it is the One Ring. It is the thing that, the football that everybody's fighting over.
The Ark of the Covenant.
Yeah, exactly.
That's in the name.
That's the name of the story. And so, we're going to be talking about MacGuffins, what they are, how to utilize them, how to move them around in the story to do fun stuff with them, and whatnot. So, yeah, we'll see you next week. You can find us on Twitter at @ST_Conclave, on Instagram at @ST_Conclave. Listen to us live every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on mixlr.com/storyteller-conclave. And join us up on our Discord. We'd love to hear from you there. Shoot us some questions. Join the great discussion with the other storytellers there. You can find that link on our Twitter as well as our website, storytellerconclave.com.
We'd like to thank our Patreon members who support us every single month, especially our name members, Knox in the Box, Subjet, Sam, The Arcane Asylum, Sparkle Motion, Vedran, Hulu, and Sean. We truly appreciate all your support. Our pre-show music is by Arcane Anthems. You can find them at patreon.com/arcaneanthems or on Instagram at Arcane Anthems or YouTube music at Arcane Anthems. Our intro music is by Beyond the Warriors by Geefrog. You can find them at geefrog.bandcamp.com or on YouTube music. And our outro music, which you're hearing right now, is Only Our Footprints in the Sand by Meteor Machine. You can find them at freemusicarchive.org.
And a big shout out, as always, to our families, Vicky and Sean. Thank you so much for loving and supporting
Thank
us. All of our friends who've sat with us at our tables over these years to give you these great stories to share with you. And you, every single one of our listeners, we love you guys so much.
Love you guys.
Good night.
Good night.